U.S. Meltblown is a company that was developed out of the dire need for effective masks to filter the COVID-19 virus. When COVID hit at the beginning of 2020, we looked around to determine how could we help U.S. commerce. And what it came around to is a decision to help to repatriate companies back here into the U.S.
When the pandemic happened, we did some research and we were going to help companies bring products back from China. And then we were shocked and disappointed when we realized that most PPE is not made in the United States. Almost all of it is. We were sitting at American Elite Molding. There was about 4 of us. We decided, let's give this a shot. So we started putting it on whiteboard and laying it out. So we kind of went out and did some test cases and just proof of concept and everything like that. And that started probably in April of last year. And we had the full plant ready to go in September of this year.
U.S. Meltblown is a manufacturing company that is making the filter media for medical masks. The filter media of the mask is the part that's really providing protection to those who are using it. The Meltblown material can be utilized and sold to customers that we have in mask making, in making other PPE like bouffant caps, gowns, shoe covers.
What we are creating here at the moment is Meltblown non-woven fabric. It's made from a polymer, which is a plastic product. Before COVID, I never wore it.
U.S. Meltblown is a company that was developed out of the dire need for effective masks to filter the COVID-19 virus. When COVID hit at the beginning of 2020, we looked around to determine how could we help U.S. commerce. And what it came around to is a decision to help to repatriate companies back here into the U.S.
When the pandemic happened, we did some research and we were going to help companies bring products back from China. And then we were shocked and disappointed when we realized that most PPE is not made in the United States. Almost all of it. We were sitting at American Molding. There was about 4 of us. We decided, let's give this a shot. So we started putting it on whiteboard and laying it out. So we kind of went out and did some test cases and just proof of concept and everything like that. And that started probably in April of last year. And we had the full plant ready to go in September of this year.
U.S. Meltblown is a manufacturing company that is making the filter media for medical masks. The filter media of the mask is the part that's really providing protection to those who use it. The Meltblown material can be utilized and sold to customers that we have in mask making, in making other PPE like bouffant caps, gowns, shoe covers.
What we are creating here at the moment is Meltblown non-woven fabric. It's made from a polymer, which is a plastic product. Before COVID, I never wore a mask, except when my kids were born. I had no idea what makes up of that surgical mask. There's 3 layers of it. You have a spun bond product, which is the blue stuff you see on the outside of the mask. And then on the inside, you have the actual filter component.
This process starts with polypropylene, which is a plastic. And what we do is we actually run the polypropylene through an extruder. It is melted, it is mixed amongst itself, and it is filtered before going into a dye body, which spreads it out along a web size output. And we actually squirt it out of a dye called the spinneret, and it squirts out a spray of melted polypropylene. That spray hits a belt and cools down just prior to hitting the belt, provides something called a nanofiber, which is actually almost a cloth type material. And then we slit it at the end into the proper size to be put on the mask making machine. And then it gets rolled up so that people can just take our rolls of that critical filtering material again and put it on their machine and make the mask.
I myself am just so excited to be making a product here working at U.S. Meltblown that is protecting U.S. citizens from viruses and bacteria family, it's protecting first responders. We rely too heavily on overseas production for key materials like masks. And it's time to repatriate that and bring jobs home and to bring the manufacturing of these products home to the United States. And that's what we're doing.
Welcome to the 2021 MakeMore Manufacturing Summit Outlook 2022. Today, we'll expand on topics covered in previous MakeMore Summits and look ahead at the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead in 2022. Florida is home to over 21,000 manufacturers that account for over 380,000 high-wage jobs in the state and for almost 5% of Florida's gross domestic product. Today, you'll hear from a wide range of business leaders as they discuss the state of manufacturing in Florida, the priorities that impact the state's manufacturing businesses, and we'll hear more about the winners of this year's Florida Sterling Manufacturing Business Excellence Awards. The 2021 MakeMore Manufacturing Summit is hosted by Associated Industries of Florida, the Florida Chamber of Commerce, Career Source Florida, Enterprise Florida, and Florida Makes. And now, here is our host for the day, the Executive Vice President of Florida Makes, Loretta Velasco.
On MakeMore Manufacturing Summit, Outlook 2022, Our Future Together. Those of you who haven't started, I think most of you have started your lunch. Please go ahead, continue enjoying your lunch. Those of you who are watching us online, you can do whatever you want. You can eat. We can't see you, so thank you all for being here. We do have a packed agenda. So if anybody needs to use the restroom in between sessions, we only have one break scheduled. The restrooms are out any of these two doors to the right and around the corner. So if nature calls, just get up and do your thing and join us back afterwards. Because if we all try to go out to the bathroom in the 5-minute break we're gonna get, I think it may be a little chaotic. So the video you just watched is from a series created by Florida Makes to highlight the companies that pivoted during the pandemic. The manufacturing sector continued to operate throughout the crisis, and often, like U.S. Meltblown, pivoted to produce products and component parts that were necessary to overcome shortages in our national stockpiles and critical supplies that we've come to rely upon other nations to produce for us. Those were mainstays of safety, health, and welfare. Throughout this crisis, manufacturers and their employees emerged as heroes. How many of you in the room are a manufacturer? Let's give manufacturers a round of applause, please. Thank you for what you did to continue operations throughout the pandemic. To watch more stories like the one you saw about U.S. Meltblown, I encourage you to visit our Manufacturing Month hub on the Made in Florida website. I think there was a slide that was, oh, there it is. So I know most of you were talking, but did anybody in the room know how the inside of a mask was made before the video was played? Maybe the manufacturers? So most of you are shaking your heads no. So if you did pay attention and you learned how that mask was, you just got your return on investment on your summit ticket. You're gonna walk out of here just a little bit smarter because you know what those masks we've been wearing for the last nth months are how they're made. If you didn't pay attention, I'm sure we'll get other ways for you to get your money back throughout the day, so no worries. If you noticed, the tag for the U.S. Meltblown was protecting our future together. We thought it was appropriate to play this video to kick off today's event because that's what we're here for, to talk about at Outlook 22, to discuss our future together. I'm really thrilled to see a full room. I think a couple tables had to pull up chairs and see so many people from areas of economic development, trade associations, government, education, and most importantly, manufacturing. Florida Makes is a statewide industry-led partnership operated by an alliance of Florida's regional manufacturers associations. There we are. So it's operated by an alliance of Florida's regional manufacturers associations that strengthens and measurably advances Florida's manufacturing economy. Our mission is to improve the productivity and technological performance of the manufacturing sector. We do this by providing services in 3 areas: talent development, business growth, and technology acceleration. Since our inception, Florida Makes, in our inception in 2015, and we started counting these numbers in 2016, Florida Makes has had an economic impact to Florida of over $2.6 billion. Yes, $1 billion. And we've helped retain or create over 17,000 jobs since 2016. But we couldn't have done any of that without the partnerships that we have with many of you in the room, but especially with those members of the Florida Makes Network, which you will see on the screen soon. You will see the Florida Makes Network on the screen soon. There they are. If you are a member of the Florida Makes Network, will you please stand? That's all the people. If you're part of the organizations and those that are represented in the logos. If you haven't met these folks, make sure you meet them before you leave today. It's thanks to them that we were able to accomplish the economic impact that we have. The MakeMore initiative was born when we kicked off the first summit back in 2018. It's a leadership-focused initiative originally developed by Florida Makes, but in partnership with Associated Industries of Florida, Career Source Florida, Enterprise Florida, and the Florida Chamber of Commerce. The collective goal of these hosting partners is to elevate the state's more than 21,000 manufacturing companies and to demonstrate their economic impact. Our organizations recognize the importance of diversifying the economy and prioritizing the growth of an industry that provides high-wage, high-value jobs that will ultimately improve the quality of life of Floridians. Now, we're not the only ones who believe in manufacturing. We have sponsors who have made a commitment to helping us achieve today's event and to move forward the MakeMore initiative. Special thanks to Kaufman Rawson, Synovus, the Florida Economic Development Council, Coastal Cloud, and the rest of the organizations you see on your screen. Some of them have exhibitor tables outside in the foyer. All of them have virtual booths on our platform. And you can access that at the FloridaMakeMore.com website. Now, before we go over housekeeping, let's do something fun. If you attended any or all 3 of the past virtual segments, it keeps going in and out, right? If you attended any of the 3 virtual segments, we encouraged you to engage with the sponsors, the exhibitors, the SMBE winners, post questions, download resources, etc., for an opportunity to win a Made in Florida basket. Now, those previous 3 segments, by the way, were business growth, in June, talent development in July, and technology acceleration in August. If you missed them, you have access to all of them through the virtual platform, and you can watch them on demand. To help us set the stage for the conversations, these that we're having today, these 3 segments focused on the issues and the challenges that manufacturers were having around, those 3 topics. So by the end of today, we want to focus our conversations on what's next. What is the outlook? What can we each do in the future within the next 12 months to take action and prioritize manufacturing for Florida? So I hope you walk away being inspired to go back to your communities and just, even if it's just one thing, take action in encouraging other stakeholders to promote and support manufacturing. Now, these gift baskets that you see here, one of them is so full it toppled over, have been brought to you by the regional manufacturers associations. Now, who can guess what the coolest thing about these baskets is? They're all made in Florida. That's right, Greg. Everything in those baskets was produced by a manufacturer in the region of the association that brought it here today. Now, I noted earlier that we had encouraged people in the virtual segments to participate for a chance to win. So we looked at our data in the engagement platform, and we've selected a winner who was the most engaged in downloading resources, making comments, asking questions, and that person is Mike Genero with AIP Precision Machining. And I think Mike is here. Mike, if you'll come up here to you get your first choice at a basket. And then if you check the back of your name tags, there should be a raffle ticket in there. I'm gonna ask Mike, after he picks out the basket he wants, to help me pick the next winner. It's heavy. I see alcohol in there.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, thanks, Mike, for being the most engaged participant during our virtual segment. So now everybody have their ticket out? I'm just gonna read the last 3 numbers. 069. Do we have a winner? No? Oh, Mike, you might have to come back. It's 069, that's all numbers, is 728069. All right, I'm gonna draw another one, so we don't have to make Mike come back over here. 728001. All right, we have a winner. Good job, yay. All right. It matches.
All right, which one do I get?
Whatever you want. You can either pick 2, you can pick 4 turvises or a basket.
Oh, wow, that's serious.
And we'll let him pick and move on with our housekeeping items before we get into the exciting conversations we're gonna have today. Yeah, take it. Any basket you want. Good job. Great. You can leave it in the back if you want.
Yeah, let's do that.
Or up here, just wherever nobody trips over it or takes it. All right, so let me go through some housekeeping items before I let you go on with the table topics, which I think most of you have already started. Today's sessions are being recorded, and you'll be able to watch them later on demand. If you're watching the live stream and are having technical difficulties, please click on the yellow square with a question mark found at the bottom of your screen. Or you can also email events@floridamakes.com with any questions, and our production team will help you. Also, for those of you online, if you'd like to interact with our attendees, you'll need to click on the green social Q&A button inside the Conferences IO tool on the left side of your screen. For those of you here in the room, at your tables, you found two pieces of collateral. One was the Florida Manufacturing Highlight, which was actually printed inside of Florida Trends October issue in honor of Manufacturing Month. It highlights the SMBE winners, Manufacturing Month, our partners, our programs. So please make sure you take that and share it with one other person when you get home. And we've got more of those outside at our booth if you want. And then there's big idea cards. Your table topic leaders might have already explained what to do with these, but as you have these conversations, please make sure you leave your big ideas written down for us, and your table leaders will collect them and then hand them back up to us. If you're a table leader, raise your hand. Table leader over here, Jason's talking. Phil over there, Rob, and Dave, great. So thank you all for leading those discussions. Well, now we have about 10 minutes left to continue with those discussions, and I'll come back to continue with the program.
Mic check, mic check, mic check. 1, 2.
Did you stop recording over there?
Ladies and gentlemen, we have 5 minutes left in this session. Please wrap up your conversations and don't forget to complete your big idea cards.
It's not. Oh, there we are. All right. All right. All right. Okay. Time's up. Please make sure you collect those big idea cards in your envelopes. If I can get everyone to please direct your attention to the screen for a message from one of our sponsors.
Hello, I'm Kevin Gillen, Market Executive with Synovus Bank. We at Synovus are thrilled to be sponsor MakeMore Manufacturing Summit. We know the manufacturing industry well, and it's vital, integral role in Florida's and the nation's economy. Over the years, we've worked closely with manufacturers to understand the ins and outs of their business. As a result, Synovus is a leader in implementing the financial services manufacturers need, providing enhanced lending options for new and used equipment, working capital, international trade, real estate and construction financing, as well as acquisition financing solutions. We're well versed in positioning manufacturers for your future success. Our subject matter experts in manufacturing verticals also runs deep within our ranks. Our relationship managers and members of organizations like Florida Makes and the Manufacturers Association's chapters throughout the state. From them, it's important to be part of the manufacturing industry's discussions that concern things like workforce development, best practice networking, business advising, advocacy, and supply chain optimization. We thank you and we look forward to meeting and supporting your manufacturing businesses. Have a great conference.
In the room. Thank you, Kevin. And I think I met one of your colleagues, Ryan, as well from Synovus. Thank you for being here and for your financial commitment to making this event happen. So we're gonna, oh, and another Synovus person here. I hadn't met you, but there's 3 people it looks like from Synovus. Thank you for your commitment to manufacturing. So before we move on to the sessions, I wanna make sure everybody's comfortable with participating and interacting. We wanna collect as many ideas from all of you as we go throughout the day. So if you will pull out your mobile devices, and if you're watching the live stream, this piece of it is actually already on your engagement platform. It's that Conferences.io window that you see on the left. But if you will type in mfg.cnf.io into your web browser on your phone, or you can scan the QR code that just showed up on the screen, and that'll open. Oh, I need to take a picture of this. Did it work? Good. So now let's give it a try. In your device, a poll should just have launched. Do you see it? It says participate in poll. What city did you travel from to get here? Orlando? Virtual. They didn't travel. Tallahassee's winning for distance so far. If you weren't able to scan the QR code, you can go into your web browser and type in mfg.cnf.io. So it looks like most of you didn't travel because the biggest city there is Orlando. Now let's move on to the next poll, see if we get more people to. It's not updating? It's updating on your phone? Okay, so can somebody tell me what the biggest city name is? Still Orlando? Atlanta? Somebody said they came from Atlanta? They get the price. Winter Park. Oh, now we lost the whole thing. All right, so the next poll question, we don't need this screen for now, you can all see it on your phones anyways, is what kind of, it should be launching now, and it says, what kind of stakeholder are you? Did it pop up on your phones? You can evaluate the session too while we're at it, or you can wait until the end of the day. We will do the trivia battle in a second. I think they're trying to launch. Oh, too many votes came in. They're reloading the platform. So in the meantime, if you want to click on Join Trivia Battle. Oh, it came up. All right. All right. Here we go. What kind of stakeholder are you? A manufacturer? An economic development professional? Educational leader? A tech expert? A workforce development professional? Or in a trade association? It looks like the numbers are still moving. There's a battle between trade association and manufacturers. All right. I think it's because we've got most of the regional manufacturers associations in the room. So was that easy? Anybody have any questions about using the engagement tool? So now you can look back at your device and click on Join Trivia Battle. Now this you really want to pay attention because the winners of the trivia battle get to take home a basket. Enter your warrior name after you click Join Trivia Battle. And make sure you remember what your warrior name is, because if you win a basket, I'm going to have to be able to identify you. And then select an icon that represents you. Now, as soon as the question comes up, the quicker you respond to the question, the more points you get. So we'll launch the first question now. Or you can scan the QR code if you haven't done so. Here we go. What area of Florida has the highest density of manufacturers? South Florida, Space Coast, Central Florida, or the Panhandle? Enter your votes to rack up points. So 44% of you said South Florida, and that is correct. South Florida actually has over 6,000 manufacturers, and that's more manufacturers than some states in the union. So the top 3 highest ranking, here we go, here's your ranking. Oh, it's moving. Pablo, where's Pablo? You're winning. And his name's Paul, really, but that's your warrior name, Pablo. All right. So this is how you'll know how your score is. You'll have time to catch up later. We'll have more trivia questions. So you can put your phones down now and pay attention here. As I said earlier, the COVID-19 pandemic has underscored manufacturing's role in providing products that are critical to health, safety, national security, and the continuity of multiple industries. It has also revealed the extent to which global supply chains are exposed to shocks and disruptions. All of this has occurred at a moment when new technology, process innovations, and demand growth are reshaping the sector worldwide. The state of manufacturing is in constant flux, depending on usual world happenings like a hurricane or an oil spill, and unusual world happenings like a pandemic. To set the stage for our conversation for the rest of the day, our first session is going to focus on the state of manufacturing today. Maria Alfano, Chief Operating Officer at Florida Makes, is here in place of our CEO, Kevin Carr. Kevin had a personal emergency, and while he's doing well, wasn't able to join us today. Maria will sit in for Kevin and moderate this discussion. But first, she'll get the conversation started with Florida's Productivity Outlook. Welcome, Maria. And
Hello? Hello? Is it on? Hello? Yeah, that one's on. Okay. So as Zoraida said, we're here to talk about the state of manufacturing here in Florida and nationally. There we go. How's that? Okay. Joining me today are Dr. Ken Wojtek and Dr. Jerry Parrish. Ken was the manager of program evaluation and economic research group, as well as the chief economist at. Can you hear me now? All right. Get it really close. Okay. All right, so Ken was also the chief economist with the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program. Now I know what Zoraida was going through, at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. He is currently principal with Mountain View Economics and also an advisor to the NIST MEP program for evaluation and also for economic research issues. Dr. Parrish is chief economist and director of research for the Florida Chamber Foundation. He's an adjunct professor at FSU for Masters in Applied Economics program, and he's also a member of the board of Florida Makes. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the state of manufacturing, and that'll be the next slide, please. I don't have a clicker. Okay. And I want you to know that I am not an economist, so I'm just going to show you some slides, give you my interpretation, and let them tell you if I'm right or wrong on the interpretation. So for the past few years, we've been, this is not going to work. Let's try this. Okay. For the past few years, we've been working with the ecosystem to move Florida into being one of the top 5 states in the nation for manufacturing employment. We have the privilege to be the goal leader on behalf of the foundation for this target. And I'm going to give you a little bit update on where we stand on this journey. Next slide, please. So these are the 12 states that we talked to you about last year. This is the cohort that we're looking at for manufacturing employment, the top 12. Florida is still number 12. California and Texas are still leading the pack. And Illinois is number 5. That's important to note because if we want to become in the top 5 states, we need to pass Illinois. Next slide, please. So we're closing the gap a little bit. In 2018, when we first talked about this, we said we needed 215,000 jobs. This past year, we closed the gap at 178,000 jobs that we still need to create to get to number 5. Now, we lost manufacturing employment between last year and this year. So did Illinois, but we didn't lose as much as Illinois. Next slide, please. And we didn't lose proportionally as much as every other state in that cohort did. So the blue shows the growth from 2018 to 2019 of manufacturing employment. And you could see Florida had a healthy growth rate last year. And then the orange shows the negative growth rate that everyone in this cohort had. And we will leave it to the economists to tell us if that was COVID related or not for last year. But if you'll note on that previous slide, we had the lowest growth rate loss of anyone else in that particular cohort. So not only do we have the smallest loss, but we still have the highest growth rate. Next slide, please. So if you look at 2014 to 2020, giving us a little bit of historical look, here is the manufacturing employment growth rate for that cohort. And Florida is definitely leading the pack. Last year, the entire cohort, except for New York, showed growth. This year, there's just a few, North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, that have growth in manufacturing employment. So it's entirely possible, if we continue on this path and keep doing what we're doing for manufacturing in Florida, that we could indeed achieve that goal of being one of the top 5 states for manufacturing employment. So now let's look at growth from a different perspective. If you would, next slide, please. So we're going to look at it from, the gross state product. And again, here's the same cohort that we're looking at, because we're looking at them for manufacturing employment, but different rankings. California and Texas still are up front, and Florida is number 13. Last year, Florida was 15, with Tennessee and Washington ahead of us. This year, it's just Washington ahead of us. So we're at number 13 this year. Next slide. So this was the growth rate between 2019 and 2020. I've got the 0.05% circled because it's minuscule and you might miss it. Of all the states in the cohort, Florida had 0.05% growth, and everyone else in the cohort had negative growth. Quite a bit of loss there. Next slide. And so this again shows what our growth rate looks like over the past 6 years, which is kind of amazing. We are the best of the 12 of our cohort, and we are the best in the nation. We are second best in the nation. Nevada is at 43%, and I have no idea what Nevada did to get to that. I can report back later. Maybe you know. But there we are with that amazing growth rate. So again, that's another indicator of what we're doing for manufacturing and how successful, and hopefully how we'll get to that target. Next slide. This is the one that interests us most. As you know, we at Florida Makes feel that manufacturing productivity is one of the most important measures of manufacturing competitiveness. So if we look at the national average, right, that's at 187,000. We are still pretty below with 156. Now that increased, we moved up about 3,000 from last year, but so did the national average. And I believe Ken might be addressing this, or will be addressing later what's happened with that, and if that productivity increase nationwide is going to remain. But you can also see our rankings down below. Florida's 31. And you can see where others in the manufacturing employment cohort are. Texas and California, way up there. The state that exceeds that is Louisiana, and I think we've talked about that in past sessions, where it's the oil industry, I believe, and the work and the employees. The productivity ratio for the oil industry, sorry. What's interesting is the cost. So when you consider, if we were to reach that $187,000 with the amount of employees that we have, then we could zero out that 11.8 billion. But right now, almost $12 billion is lost to the Florida economy. So that doesn't look so good. But then take a look at the last slide, which shows productivity growth rate. And again, that is, it shows a good picture for Florida. It's the highest in this cohort, and as a matter of fact, it's number 6 in the nation for this past year. So to go back to our target goal of being one of the top 5 states in the nation for manufacturing employment, I think with these different approaches, I think if we continue what we're doing, well, there's probably a good shot of getting there in about 10 years. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ken for a national look.
All right.
Can everyone hear me? No? I can scream. There. Can you hear me now? All right. 3 things before I start. First, it's important, and these are the 3 things you need to take away from this presentation, is God created economists to make weathermen look good. Second, never let a good crisis go to waste. That's an operative term given COVID and everything else. And then just to show you how weird and odd I am, in my household, every day is manufacturing day and productivity day. So those are the three things. I obsess about productivity. I obsess about manufacturing. Next slide, please. What I'm going to do is kind of give you kind of a national perspective on what's happening to manufacturing. None of this is probably too surprising, but when the national emergency was declared, manufacturing across several dimensions basically dropped off the cliff. I'm old enough to remember the wide world of sports when they used to focus on Acapulco cliff diving, and that's how I kind of characterized it. But as quickly as manufacturing turned down, it also turned up. And probably many of you, who read the newspaper, economists were calling it the V recovery, the L recovery, the Nike swoosh recovery. I like to refer to it right now as the square root recovery. So if you think about it, it goes up, it goes down, and then it levels out. And you see a little bit of that right now. In terms of what's happening in terms of the rebound, both in terms of productivity and employment. The next slide, please. And only an economist would love something like this. But this notion about capacity utilization, my rule of thumb is when capacity utilization is generally above 80%, is when manufacturers will begin to invest in new equipment, new capacity. And it's really interesting is, over the last, since 2009, kind of emerging from the recession, capacity utilization has basically been flat. And the same thing, and I think this is interesting, and this is, really important when you're thinking about productivity, is what's clear in manufacturing is we're basically producing the same amount of real output that we were in, let's say, 2009, 2010. With just a few more people. And I think that's important for manufacturers to kind of think about because, typically when people think about productivity, they think about, oh, I want to be more efficient, I'm going to lower my cost. But to me, productivity is really about doing more, making more with the same amount of inputs. And I think that's kind of a critical kind of point. The next slide, please. And this is, because I'm in the Sunshine State and people, when I used to work at NIST MEP, referred to me as Mr. Sunshine. That was a sarcastic comment. I like to kind of, freshen things up with the perspective of what are manufacturers saying in terms of their outlook. And it's really interesting, the ISM index, which is a national survey of manufacturers, how is business across a set of dimensions, is that, it took a dive during COVID, but again, much like everything else I talked about, it quickly came back. But again, you see, which reflects the, 2 or 3 prior charts, a little bit of leveling off in terms of that optimism on part of manufacturers. Next slide, please. And this is my favorite chart, policy uncertainty. I am from Washington, and it is refreshing to get outside of that echo chamber. But I think it's important for people to realize how important public policy, whether it's at the state level, the local level, or the federal level, influences, kind of manufacturers' investment decisions. And in fact, it's been proven over time as policy uncertainty rises and spikes, capital investment, CapEx, basically declines. This only goes up through, I think, the end of August, if I remember right. So it doesn't capture some of the interesting things around the debt ceiling, the federal budget, a whole bunch of those, fun topics. And the last slide, which is anything that's ever happened wrong with NIST MEP is usually my fault. So maybe that's a fourth takeaway. But one of the interesting things is we've been doing a survey of all of the clients that the centers serve since 2009. And, it's not too surprising when we kind of look at this chart. I'm not going to beat the employee recruitment and retention drum. Everybody knows that's an issue. But I think more interesting is what's happening in terms of manufacturers. We asked them, what are the three, I characterize it as the three things that keep you up at night. And you see technology needs and supply chain management are slowly creeping up. And in fact, when we look at those two challenges on a quarter by quarter basis, you're really seeing a rather significant increase in the number of clients who cite that as an important issue. And I think this particular slide dovetails nicely with some of the strategic plan for MEP. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jerry because he's far more dynamic than I am.
Well, guys, can you hear me okay? Nope. Is that better? Okay. Well, I'm wondering why you guys are being punished. There's two economists in a row speaking to you. You must have done something really, really bad. But I want to go back and talk about this goal. Maria mentioned the goal of being a top 5 manufacturing state in the country. And I see they've already put up my slide here. This is it comes from the Florida 2030 Blueprint. If you're not familiar with that project, it's a one-of-a-kind project. We went around to all 67 of Florida's counties. We engaged more than 10,000 people live in rooms like this to really talk about the kind of Florida that they wanted. And it literally is a privately funded strategic plan for the state. And out of that, we came up with 39 goals. And you can see one listed on there. At the time we did this, Florida, if it was an independent country, would be the 17th largest economy in the world. And the goal, one of the goals is to move to be the 10th, and not just to be big, it's to provide opportunity. Let's, have more jobs to keep our college graduates here. It's provide opportunity for people in every zip code in the state of Florida. The good news is we've bumped up to 15th last year, and we overtook Mexico and Indonesia. Florida's got about 22 million people. Mexico has 120 million. And Indonesia has 270 million. So that means Florida's per capita GDP is extremely high. And I tell this to business people all around the state. I speak almost every single day to a business group. Florida's GDP per capita is higher than Germany's. And that's stunning to people. And so with this goal of being, now 15th and trying to get to 10th, the goal is to increase GDP. Well, what's GDP? GDP, think of it, don't think about this stupid economist formula. I bet neither one of us could even remember what it is at this point. Think of it as added value. How much added value do you add to something while it's in your state? That's exactly what the best definition of GDP is. Manufacturing is one of the top industries in doing that, right? You take components, you put them together, you sell it at a high price. The difference in what you sell it for and what you paid for those components or inputs, that's GDP. It's the same with a restaurant meal. It's the same with everything. But manufacturing has extremely high value added. That is highly correlated with high wages, right? So when we take our Florida Economic Development Council, their goal is to increase Florida's GDP and increase it in the rural areas. They say, well, how do we do that? And I say, create more jobs. And oh, by the way, the higher the percentage of manufacturing jobs, the better off you're going to be. So, that says, 39 goals up there. How do we track them? The next slide will show you the Florida scorecard. I hope everybody is familiar with this. I've been preaching about this. Mark Wilson is. You'll see him in a little while running a panel up here. We talk about this constantly. It's free to use. There's hundreds of thousands of pieces of data there at the state level and at the county level. And if you hadn't been on it, I'm ashamed of myself for not getting around enough to do it. But there's what the front page of the Florida scorecard looks like. It shows things like, Florida's a big economy. We got about 800 net new people a day moving here. And with some of the important things, Florida created about more than 1 out of every 11 jobs in this country between 2015 and 2020 when COVID hit. But anyway, take a look at that. There's a little circle up there on that gray bar. The gray bar is a live link. And I've got a circle around one of those 6 pillars of the Florida economy. You know, there's talent, supply, and education on the left. The next one is innovation and economic development. So literally, if you were on your phone or computer and you clicked on that, you'd actually see some info on the next slide. And I've just picked off a couple here. There's a bunch of tiles on this thing. I've picked off a couple that are super important. You know, these are the annual job numbers. So, you know, these are 2020 numbers. It shows how many jobs Florida has had in manufacturing as an average in 2020. It actually went down. We lost a few jobs. We lost about 7,800 jobs from 2019 to 2020. So that tile is red. But you see 12th there. That's where we are. Maria's already mentioned that. And the top 5 is our 2030 goal. It also shows the percentage of jobs that are manufacturing jobs, the percentage of private sector jobs, 5.1%. And below that, the percentage of wages that come from Florida, that's 6.1%. And the average wage, more than $66,000. So when I talk to economic developers out there, you know, we can easily say, creating more manufacturing jobs diversifies Florida economy, and it creates good jobs for people. You got to think about it this way. $25.1 billion of manufacturing wages were paid last year in the state of Florida. And even though we lost 7,800 jobs, that was up over $500 million from the year before. So good wages, you know, it's something that we can all be proud of, diversifying our economy. What's super important, I want you guys to think about it. When you go to the county page and you click on that innovation and economic development, it'll tell these same numbers for every single county out there. So when you're dealing with your legislators, you're dealing with your local newspapers, be proud of it. In a lot of cases, it may be 4 or 5 or 6% of jobs are manufacturing jobs, but it may be 12, 13, or 14% of the wages paid in that county are manufacturing wages. And that's one of the ways we promote this. You know, it's good for your region. It's something you can do. We also have a goal of doubling our share of GDP that comes from Florida's rural counties. And so I tell the rural economic developers, hey, here's the fastest way to get to your GDP goals, and it is through manufacturing. I'm proud to be a Florida Makes board member, proud to be with you guys here today. I know we got some questions, and so I'll turn it back over to Maria.
Well, thank you, Jerry. So I want to pick up on what you were just saying. So what can we do? What can business groups do, economic developers, regional development agencies? What can we do to show the importance of manufacturing to their region in the state of Florida?
Well, the easy way to show the importance is you know, let's be blunt here. You guys know this. You know, I've been to county commissions and talked to state legislators and talked to people all over, and they'll say this: we don't have any manufacturing in our region. And it's like, are you kidding me? I mean, I've heard that time and time again because I talk to everybody all over the state. So, you know, raise your profile. You know, the best way, and I spoke to Representative Yarborough a little bit ago, you know, we were talking about how to raise your profile with the legislature. You know, first of all, go see them. Tell them what you do, invite them to your place. And by the way, don't wait until session. You're right in the middle of session and go up there and try to ask for something. You know, get to know these guys. And this is probably a little bit of a selfish ask too, but one of the things when I talk to local chambers, and by the way, they're not part of the Florida Chamber. A lot of them are members of ours. So, you know, I don't receive any benefit from this. But manufacturers are silent in a lot of cases. They're busy running their shops. I get it. There's a lot of value, though, to joining a local chamber just to let that group know that you're there. Let them know what you do. You know, remember you know, if you don't know manufacturing, you have this old school mentality, smokestack, you know, view of what's going on in manufacturing out there. So by just getting to know more of the local people and through a local chamber, Kiwanis Club, I don't care how you do it, and have kids over there for a factory tour, those kind of things, lets people know you're there. They let you know. I mean, tell them your average, what your average wage is. That'll get a lot of attention as well. But that's part of it. It's great to be running your business and all that stuff, but you need somebody out there in the public to be a public face, even though you're busy, even though they're busy. That's the top thing you can do right now to expand the presence of manufacturing that we've already got here.
Thank you. And I have a question for Ken too about productivity. I alluded to it before. There does seem to be a slowdown in productivity growth in manufacturing. You would think that, and some have said we might be in a recession, productivity recession, with the advanced manufacturing technologies that are out there, and the emphasis that we've seen and heard about that. Why haven't we seen productivity growing faster?
I think a couple of reasons. One of the things that I mentioned earlier is this notion about real output not increasing. I think that's something for companies to reflect on. And I want to emphasize when Jerry, in his earlier comments, was talking about this notion of GDP. For you that are companies or an association, if you really think about GDP per employee, it's really your gross margin. It's your total revenue minus cost of goods sold. That's what GDP essentially boils down to. So it's important for companies. Jerry raised the point about the connection between productivity and wages, but there's also a connection between productivity and profitability. The other thing that we see in terms of when we look at productivity numbers is one, there's growing dispersion across manufacturers within the same sector. Something is odd and generic is like cement manufacturing. What you see is a growing dispersion across the 90th percentile versus the 10th, or the 75th versus the 25th. And I think that's an issue. So you see the separation between what economists would call frontier firms and then everyone else operating below kind of that frontier. I also think, when manufacturers are thinking about productivity, there's probably a couple of things. There's a series of studies that have documented, and I want to really reinforce this, the importance of management practices to company performance. Companies that have adopted a set of very sophisticated management practices do better in terms of productivity, in terms of profitability, in terms of growth, in terms of their probability of survival. So I think that's kind of important for folks to think about. And the final thing is this whole notion, and I don't want to use the term smart manufacturing or industry 4.0. I see those things being thrown around. I like to think about it, in terms of advanced manufacturing technologies. I think it's critically important that manufacturers begin to kind of develop, what is my plan to move my company kind of forward in terms of being at that cutting edge. It's just not, I installed email and therefore I'm industry 4.0. I've actually heard a large company, someone from their supply chain management, that is an advancement. But I think it's, it's kind of a progression, taking some small steps. And it's really a journey. It's not, we adopted a robot and therefore we're done. It's something more. So hopefully that helped, or I confused everybody.
And for Jerry, I wanted to know, the foundation does a lot of research. How can we use that to help diversify the economy?
Hi, thanks. I don't know if you heard Maria, but she said, how do you use more of Florida Chamber Foundation research to help diversify the economy? And that's a really good question. We do a lot at the Chamber Foundation. One of the things that we take a look at is all our industries, and we try to be very timely as far as our research. The latest research we've got out, we released this summer, And I hope you're going to join us tomorrow at the Florida Chamber Foundation's Future of Florida Forum. We'll be talking about this a lot, and it's going to be right next door here. So all you have to do is stay over the next couple of days, and you'll be able to see what we're talking about. But one of the things we just did was called the Florida Workforce Needs Study. And what we got to looking at was, remember when COVID hit, everybody was scrambling and nobody knew what was going to happen. But what we saw is a bunch of people laid off, a bunch of businesses closed. We worked with our SBDC during COVID, some of that research. What was really important about that research, and it was talking about the impact of COVID on small business. What came out of that was a really definable number of how many, jobs were created in Florida out of small businesses. And what's the number, Greg? 60% of all net new jobs come from businesses with less than 100 employees. And it's like, wow, a lot of our manufacturers have less than 100 employees. Certainly, there's big companies, J&J, and those kind of folks that are there, and they've got a lot of employees. But it really showed the importance of that. And what I really think, I hope happens is, our legislature really concentrates on that. But back to the Florida Workforce Needs Study, what was happening is a lot of people with good skills were out of work. And a lot of them, as take a look at the leisure and hospitality industry, heavily hit. By far the worst hit, no big surprise. There were no visitors coming for a while, and still we don't have our international visitors. So what we did was, compared to the old days, as an economist in the old days, we'd forecast by industry. Manufacturing needs X thousand employees, and this industry needs this many. A few years ago, we started looking at occupations. It's like I always use accountants. There's accountants in manufacturing. There's accountants in all these industries. So we'd forecast it by that. And that's still a pretty good way to do forecasting. If you're a high school kid and you're working with your parents, your career counselor, you can see what industries are going to be growing, how much they pay. You can kind of figure out how much training it's going to cost. But what we thought about was those people who had skills. There's an adult worker out there who's got some skills. Maybe they want to change into manufacturing, or they want to change into something else. What are those 1 or 2 or 3 skills that they need to get into an industry that maybe they'll enjoy more, maybe it's growing more, maybe it pays more, but at least, gives them the opportunity to take a look at that. And so I really think we've laid the groundwork out there for all our state colleges. Remember, we got the best state college system in the entire country here in Florida. Our adult educators, technical schools, high schools to think about, what opportunities there are out there. And certainly there's going to be lots of opportunities in manufacturing. And so we've laid that out. That kind of research can help change our education system, hopefully influence our legislators. What I think is going to happen here, and I think you'll see this in manufacturing specifically. I believe the big change is going to be, and I'm not knocking businesses, trust me, I work for the Florida Chamber. I'm not going to do that. But businesses have gotten kind of lazy, right, when they're hiring people. They kind of, in a lot of cases, they look at a college degree as a signal. This kid started something and finished something. It may be in psychology or, history or something else, but, they started and finished something. I hope we'll change that culture where they really start looking at skills. And I believe our state college system is in the best position to create those certifications for those skills that manufacturers need. It's up to you guys to work with the state colleges and adult educators and to let them know what you need. But I really believe we're going to see much more of that, more certifications, less actual degrees, and those certifications really pointed toward manufacturing are going to be the ones that help grow this industry.
Thank you, Jerry. Before we move on to audience questions, I know Ken would.
I'm just anxious to say something that has been a hobby horse of mine for several years. I think one of the things for folks to think about, and certainly for manufacturers, but thinking about kind of your talent in the context of a supply chain. I think it's important for companies to begin thinking that way. And that also includes this whole notion about planning. I don't know how many manufacturers I walk around and they all look like me, you know, no hair, short, falling over, and they're surprised. It doesn't take too much, you know, to begin to forecast that, you know, Ken's 80 years old, it's probably unlikely he's going to be around for very long. So beginning to kind of think about that. And the final thing, and this probably isn't as important these days, but, you know, back in 2008, 2009, when we had a lot of people available in the workforce, and yet, you know, companies would complain we couldn't find anybody. You know, there was an interesting set of research that pointed out that employers were having unrealistic expectations. I think it was Peter Capelli at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania who termed it the purple squirrel, you know, where you're looking for this perfect person to serve ice cream cones with a PhD and could add numbers up in their head. And I think it's important for companies to begin, and I think it's, you know, what Jerry said, what are those transferable skills? What are those 2 or 3 kind of key things that someone needs? You can train them, you can kind of, you know, get them into place. So I think that's just important for folks to kind of think about in terms of some practical things.
Okay. All right, we'd like to open it up for questions.
And if you'll raise your hand, we need to make sure you ask the questions into the mic. There's one right here, so that our friends from the virtual platform can hear.
This one works.
Oh.
Can you hear me now?
It's number 3.
All right. So, gentlemen, Ken and Jerry, my question is for, as you gaze into your crystal ball, how do you see U.S. manufacturing?
Oh, man.
12 months. And then what should small businesses be doing?
Ken, go ahead.
All right. I said this in probably January. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you hear him?
I'm going to make a commercial for AT&T.
There you are.
Whatever
There you go.
it happens to be. In January of 2020, I wrote a paper that I was cautiously optimistic about the outlook for manufacturers. So I, you know, want to be careful in terms of characterizing, you know, where I am at this point. I'm cautiously optimistic that manufacturing will grow. You know, right now, my feeling is the turnaround, the recovery for manufacturing is delayed but not derailed. So I think that's important. You know, I think, you know, manufacturers need to kind of work through things. And I just want to, another thing, you know, when I talked about the notion of advanced manufacturing technologies, we just did a survey of manufacturers in Illinois. And what we found is that those companies that were much more advanced in terms of adopting new technologies actually were able to weather COVID-19 and the downturn better than those that had not started on that journey. So I think that's kind of important. You know, this whole notion about resiliency includes everything from hurricanes to pandemics to Ken Wojtek coming to the state of Florida. So.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ken. Any other, right here? There we go, Donna, thank you.
Hi, I'm Donna with the Able Trust. You both touched on talent just a little bit with Dr. Parrish with upskilling and then Mr. Vortek with supply chain. We know a lot of manufacturers are faced with talent shortfalls right now. For either one of you or both of you, do you think this is transitory?
You want to start? You want me to?
No. I mean, if you look at birth rates, if you look at the last census, I mean, population barely increased. So I think, that at least from my perspective, the notion of this being permanent, but I think there's some bright spots. And this may bother some people, but I think issues around immigration, where you have the opportunity to increase the pool through alternatives, also looking at alternatives. I mean, our Indiana MEP has been going into prisons and working with prisoners who are soon to be released and kind of taking them through kind of the manufacturing boot camp to get them basically up to speed. And at least based on the results, it seems to be positive. So I think, kind of for manufacturers kind of thinking anew about, what am I looking for? Where do I look? And that could include gender, race, ethnicity, and just, non-traditional groups. So, Jerry?
Yeah, I think we got two different things going on here. Ken's right, I believe, about the U.S., but Florida's a little different. Remember, the U.S. population grew at the slowest rate it had since the 1930s. It's the lowest. But remember, Florida's population, my forecast when I did it in January said about 800 net new people a day. So Florida is actually growing at the slowest rate it has in history, but we're still growing at more than double or around double the U.S. rate. Now, when I say we're growing at the slowest rate in history, it's pretty hard for the top 3 states in the country to grow at some super high rate. So it doesn't mean we don't have a lot of population growth here on a relative basis. So with those people moving to Florida, I think it's an opportunity for manufacturers here. We certainly are expecting more reshoring. My theory was when this COVID thing first started, it's like, hey, we're never going to be in the position where we need stupid stuff like, personal protection gear and all that stuff. And we're at some other country's dependence. We're not going to do that. I just can't even imagine that. Just think about all that stuff we're having to produce now. And when this thing is finally over, you can imagine that every hospital and every company is going to stockpile this stuff. So there's opportunities for all kind of things, healthcare and otherwise. I think Florida is poised to win the game. Remember, we're going to have population growth. If people that can work from anywhere can certainly work from Florida, and we'll see a lot of those people in there. A lot of the population, I believe, will move toward the rural counties. That's going to provide opportunities. Let's say you're a small manufacturer and you need 60 people. In the old days, you may not have been able to find that many people in a rural county, but now as population's moving out there, think about one spouse can work from anywhere, the other spouse needs a job. I think that's going to provide a lot of opportunities for us here. So 2 different things. Florida better off than the U.S. absolutely on this one. And that's the way I see it happening. And I believe, I talked to the economic developers out there. There's been a substantial increase in manufacturing interest moving to Florida, especially Northeast Florida has been one of the really strongest points where, we're likely to see some pretty big relocations coming down here. And I think all of Florida is going to win, probably North Florida, more available land, other opportunities, good transportation network. What you may not know is one of the things we're working on right now at the Chamber Foundation is we're updating our trade and logistics report. Trade and Logistics 2.0 we did. I actually was working for TaxWatch when I started working with the Chamber on that report. And now we're updating that and excited to be doing that. Florida Makes is a major sponsor of that report. What we found in that TL 2.0 is, we noticed that about half of our trains, trucks, ships, containers, airplanes were leaving Florida empty. We were bringing in consumer goods, but we have to ship out air. Shipping air is extremely expensive. it costs us, it makes our inbound freight a lot more expensive because the probability of a backhaul is much lower. So the more manufacturing goods we can make and stick in those containers, ships, trains, and trucks, that lowers our inbound freight costs. It makes our businesses more competitive. It saves consumers money. So manufacturing is actually the answer here. Without a doubt, it's very, very clear. And I believe when you see that, the recruitment efforts we've got going on, we gotten the machinery and equipment sales tax killed. The Florida Chamber led that fight. A lot of opportunities down here, and manufacturers are figuring that out.
All right, I think we're out of time for questions.
Thank you. And I guess, I don't know, can you hear me? Yes. So we have Ken, who normally is quite pessimistic, is cautiously optimistic about the state of manufacturing in Florida. And we have a great deal of optimism from Jerry based on our population growth and the different things that are happening in Florida. So we all know what the issues are that we're working on. We'll be talking about those this afternoon, but the outlook looks pretty good for manufacturing in Florida. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, Kevin, and Jerry, for your time and your data-driven, insightful discussion. If you didn't get your question in, please make sure you submit it through the application we used earlier. You saw that somebody did put one up there. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to answer it, but we'll submit that to these panelists and make sure that the person who did gets an answer to the question. The evaluation for the summit is open on that platform as well. So throughout the day, if you have time to complete the evaluation and give feedback, we'd appreciate it. Now, for a chance to continue earning points or one of these baskets, if you still have that browser open, click to it on your phone. If not, you can open your camera app and scan the QR code again. I'll give you a couple seconds. I see a few people lifting their phones up again to get that application opened. All right. If you weren't here earlier, scan this, click on Join Trivia Battle, select your warrior name and icon, and get ready to battle. All right. The next question should be coming up on your phones now. Using productivity as a measure, where does Florida rank nationwide? And remember, the quicker you answer, the more points you get. Are we 12th, 30th, 29th, or 3rd in productivity? We went over this earlier. So if you were paying attention, is the timer up for 45 seconds? Okay. All right, and the answer is we rank 30th. And let's see if that changed in the leaderboard. Let's see if Pablo is still leading. Oh, Pablo, oh my God, Pablo, you're off the screen. Sama SRMA, I'm assuming that's Rob Harris. All right, you've got some competition there, Paul. So understanding the existing business landscape manufacturers are dealing with will be essential for Florida to continue diversifying our economy and remaining a global competitor. What needs to be done? How do stakeholders react to get manufacturing businesses to the next level? We'll get those answers to these questions during our next panel. It'll be moderated by Mark Wilson, President and CEO of the Florida Chamber of Commerce, and a hosting partner for today's summit. Mark, I know you have a big event tomorrow, so we really appreciate you being here. If we can have you and the rest of the panelists come up to the stage, we'll kick off our next discussion. Please join me in welcoming Mark.
All right, Zarata, thank you very much for that introduction. And I want to thank the prior panel as well. That was really a good setup for what we're going to do here right now. So As Zoraida said, I am Mark Wilson. I have the privilege of being the president of Florida's Chamber of Commerce. And I also happen to be the national chair of our National Association of State Chambers. And the only reason I say that right out of the box is between what Jerry Parrish works on and what I work on, we have a global and a national perspective on what's happening in other states and other countries. And I will tell you, if I could invest in an industry sector, it would be manufacturing. And if I could invest in a state, it would be Florida. And so for Florida Makes to be putting this conference together right now to talk about how can we make more, I think it's the right conversation in the right state at the right time. And so the way we're going to do the next 50 minutes or so is I'm going to quickly turn it over to Greg here. And I have a question for each one of our panelists. They're going to be talking a little bit about what they do and how they help businesses grow in Florida. And of course, our entire focus today is going to be specifically on manufacturing. And we're talking a lot about small businesses, obviously, as we go forward with this. I know you heard Dr. Parrish talk a bit about manufacturing, so I don't want to repeat anything that he would have said. But I think as president of Florida's Chamber, I think what's important on an international scale is when you think of how big of a deal Florida is. I know Dr. Parrish talked about if Florida was a country, we would be the 15th largest economy in the world. Everything we do, from our political action and recruiting candidates to the advocacy that we do to the research that our foundation does, is all focused on how do we get Florida to the 10th largest economy in the world in 10 years. That's our entire focus. And the truth is, one of the 39 ways we get there, in fact, you can't do it without significantly growing manufacturing in Florida. So I know you already saw the screen earlier that says we need to add about 200,000 manufacturing jobs in Florida. And when we do that, we'll eclipse Illinois. So I want you to be thinking about what does Florida have to do to get ahead of Illinois in the next 10 years in terms of manufacturing jobs. A couple things we have going in our direction, sort of, I'm a pilot, so I'll use things like headwinds and tailwinds. And so when you think about the tailwind that we have, the whole world wants to reshore supply chain to their country. And America is going to lead that charge. Why wouldn't we see Florida as the center of that universe? When you think about our investments in infrastructure, you heard earlier about the transportation and logistics work that we've been doing for a decade. And right now we're embarking on a several $100,000 initiative to reposition Florida as the best state in America for the reshoring of supply chain manufacturing jobs. So just be thinking about the tailwind that we have in large part because of COVID. Think about the headwinds that Illinois, Ohio, New York have right now. They've increased regulatory issues, litigation issues, the cost of doing business in those states. So if we do this right, Florida can win. But I hope there's not one person in the room today that thinks that if we just sit back and watch Illinois do what they do or watch other countries do what they do, that we're somehow going to be the winner. That's not how competition works. And so the next part of our discussion here, we're going to hear from 4 teammates that we work with on a regular basis in terms of how do we work as one. And before I turn it over to Greg and ask Greg the first question, let me just say one of the observations that I make as I travel all over Florida to all 67 of our counties is there is a Grand Canyon style void in Florida right now of left hand and right hand knowing what's going on. And so think about if you've dedicated your life, if you're in manufacturing today, then you know it like nobody else does. But if you're wanting to get into it, or you've been into it for a while and maybe you need some assistance, you don't know where to go. And so one of the things that's frustrating for all of us is if we have the resources sitting right next to me for probably 70 or 80% of solutions that need to come out. So I hope when we walk away from this panel today, not only are we refocused on how does Florida grow 200,000 more manufacturing jobs and how do we beat Illinois, but I hope also you hear from my 4 teammates up here about tools and resources. Maybe they will help you and your company, or maybe they'll help one of your suppliers, or maybe they'll help a family member. And so that's really what we wanted to do here in the next little bit, so to speak. So Greg Britton, I'm going to go to you first, Greg, and I'm just going to go right on down the line. So I have a series of questions that some of them you know I'm going to ask, some of them you don't. But what I want all of you to be thinking about is as soon as we get through a few questions, we are going to go in a bit, we are going to go to questions from the audience. So be thinking about that. I personally hope you'll ask questions from these four panelists about, you know, what do we need to do in Florida? What do we need to do better? What do we need to stop doing? How could we become a global center for manufacturing? And that's really what we're interested in hearing. So Greg runs the Florida Small Business Development Center Network. And I think, Greg, I think everyone in here knows you, but if you could just quickly tell us what does the SBDC do? And what do you specifically do for small businesses and specifically for manufacturing? How do you help? Why don't we start there?
Yeah, great. So as Mark said, I'm Greg with the Florida Small Business Development Center Network. You know, so what we do is we offer a no-cost service. We're funded through the SBA, and we also get some state funds to help small businesses grow and prosper. You know, we are so fortunate to work with some of the most passionate individuals in our state of Florida, and that's those small business owners. They work hard every day to create their legacies, and we're just there to help support them in doing that. And we have about 300 people across the state, from Pensacola to Jacksonville to the Keys, and we have 9 different regions in our state. And I'll kind of leave it at that, but I think what's important to know is I was in manufacturing for 25 plus years, so I know manufacturing pretty well. And I work for a company in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. When I started, there were about 56 employees. We ended up being about 220 employees. I just want you to know the significance of that is that in 2010, the owner of that company died in an airplane accident. It was instantaneous. And the landscape of that company changed forever. And, you know, we had a succession plan in place, but it wasn't all that it needed to be. So we can help with things like that, one-on-one consulting, training, and research type things. But I think what was most important is that I called on the SBDC to help me. We had a product called Ease Doors and Windows. As the CEO of the company and running that, I didn't know what they wanted to do with that product. The family didn't know what they wanted to do with that product. So the SBDC came in, they asked a bunch of questions, you know, hey, do you want to manufacture the products in-house? Do you want to outsource those products? Do you want to keep on with the engineering? Do you want to, you know, go through Miami-Dade hurricane approvals? What do you want to do? Just a bunch of series of questions. And out of that came a plan. And the SBDC at UWF came back with a plan and said, here's the things you can look at. You know, things we didn't think about. We had developed that door, those windows for condos. And they said, well, what about the mountain areas? What about that, you know, the elevations and the winds there? What about the luxury yacht industry? And so just brought a bunch of different things to bear for that. So, you know, just know that we're there to support. Really the front end process, we do get into Six Sigma and lean manufacturing and 6S and all those things, but we're really good on that front end process, the marketing, the business plans, you know, the strategy of how you buy things and inventory things. So that's how we help manufacturers.
All right, well, Greg, thanks for that, and I'm sure we'll get some questions on it later. So I'm going to go next, Dave Carrier. Dave's here representing Grow FL. But what you need to know is Greg actually is a manufacturer. So he's here in both roles. And so Dave, I'm going to ask you to talk about, as a manufacturer, how has Grow FL, or for that matter, SBDC, actually helped your business?
Yeah, and I think they're both linked. One of the things that surprised me, I started a company in 2007, and my first experience with one of the EDCs was the Volusia EDC in 2010. I wish I would have met that guy in 2007, which is the first point I want to make is, you know, the exposure to the organization, to the structure. Because from that point forward, even though I moved the business from Volusia to Seminole County, the EDCs followed right along, the Seminole County, city of Sanford, and we developed in there. So just the amount of information that wasn't previously available to a new manufacturer, new business owner, was amazing through these organizations. And it really helped, and it's really the big reason I'm sitting here. As the chairperson of Grow FL, I've seen the value that peer-to-peer kind of information can provide. And I hope to do the same for someone else who would probably be sitting in my position saying, okay, where do I go from here? I've got this great idea. I've got this great product or service that I want to develop in Florida. And how do I go about doing that? The entire structure and organization of my factory floor was developed with myself, my production manager, Dan Sutter with Florida Makes. We sat down and went through, and that facility is world-class. We're about to reach ISO 9001, hopefully within the next week or two. And we couldn't have done that by ourselves. So the impact for me, both as a business owner and personally as someone who now supports the sort of the infrastructure that we have built here, has been dramatic.
Probably going to come back to you on that just a little bit later. Next, I want to switch to Enterprise Florida. Destin Wells actually is the Senior Vice President. He heads up business development. And if you don't know what Enterprise Florida is, hopefully you'll look it up later. But Florida has to market itself, right? Everybody thinks we're low cost, we have tourism, beaches, and no income tax, and therefore that's our model. Far from it. Last I checked, we were top 20 in terms of most diversified economies in the United States. And the reality of it is Enterprise Florida plays an important part in helping to market Florida as a state for next level businesses, including manufacturing. So Destin, my question of you is what role, there are a lot of industry sectors in Florida and manufacturing has been a target for a long time. What role does manufacturing play in the way Enterprise Florida thinks about diversifying the economy, and what are some of the things that you do at Enterprise Florida to help?
Sure. Well, I appreciate the question. Good morning and afternoon, and thank you. Good to see everybody here. Good to see some old friends from the old Sarasota area. Good to see you, Rob. So Enterprise Florida, we are the principal economic development partner with the state of Florida. So what does that actually mean? We're the jobs group, really. So we work to grow our industry. We work to attract industry into the state, certain industries, diversifying industries into the state. And it really boils down to job creation, capital investment, economic and fiscal impact for our communities, jobs and opportunity for our citizens and our friends here in Florida. Manufacturing is one that there's a bit of a misnomer when it comes to manufacturing as it pertains to targeted industries or what you look at. We do have as a targeted sector manufacturing. Other targeted sectors include aviation, aerospace, life sciences. Some of them spill over into other areas, professional financial services and corporate headquarters, some different areas. But if you really think about manufacturing, one of the challenges is the definition of manufacturing. You make stuff. So aviation, aerospace in the state of Florida, very, very strong sector for us. They're making stuff. And in fact, all of their NAICS codes, or North American Industrial Classification System codes, are manufacturing. Life sciences, same thing. When I saw the sponsor list, I was very happy to see both representation from life science and aviation aerospace in addition to our traditional manufacturing base. So what do we do to affect that? We have a series of partners, principally, that we work with. We sit at a certain crossroads of all kinds of organizations, governmental, non-governmental, different partners in workforce, higher education, you really name it. And so we help facilitate conversations and connections with a lot of our different partners and companies, addressing whatever the particular need of that instance is. We all know that every single one of you, every one of your companies is different, has different needs, has different challenges. And so one of the parts of our job, and what I find personally kind of fulfilling and interesting, is that we get to navigate all kinds of different distinct issues, and each one of those requires a different set of partners, a different set of tools. If it's financing, we do have our MASBEC, Minority and Small Business Program. We have the State Small Business Credit Initiative. If it's workforce, we call up our good friends at CareerSource, at Veterans Florida. Consulting services, I mean, Grow Florida and Florida Makes and the SBDC. And I mean, there's so many partners and DEO with the Florida Job Growth Fund. There's so many, to the point about the resources and the partners and folks. Part of what we're doing is trying to lift the fog and to help our companies understand the opportunities in front of them. This extends to investments in infrastructure and in workforce, primarily through Adam and a program that he'll talk about. But really, it's a holistic approach to trying to help and to grow an industry, tackling the challenges and the needs of the day, understanding that any given day those can rapidly change and evolve to something completely different.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Dustin. Adam, I'm coming to you next. Adam Calloway's with the Department of Economic Opportunity. And in case you don't know what that means or how it works, a lot of states have a very disorganized way of doing economic development. They have this department over here, over there. In Florida, a few years ago, we fixed all that and we created a Department of Economic Opportunity, and we put Space Florida, Enterprise Florida, Career Source, Film Florida, and I could go on and on. But the whole concept, which is always still a work in progress, just like manufacturing is always about continuous improvement, the whole process, the whole design was how can we get faster and how can we get speed and consistency into the system of economic development. And so my question here for the Department of Economic Opportunity is, when you're thinking about all the infrastructure that exists and you think about speed of decisions, oftentimes companies are looking at, a couple countries or a couple of states, and they want to know that Florida has its act together. And so from an infrastructure standpoint, from a speed standpoint, how does the Department of Economic Opportunity look at this, and what's our approach in terms of what's still needed on infrastructure, and what's our approach to be clear, a ball and a strike, and how do we do it faster?
Well, I'll tell you from a speed standpoint, I consistently work on my wind sprints to make sure I can do things faster. So I'm down to a 5-second 40. So we're good on that. But from a serious perspective, you made a comment in your opening statement about left hand, right hand. And I think from the state's perspective, understanding what local communities, regional EDOs, our state partners are doing, and being able to work with them from the very foundations of business development is key to being able to move that ball down the field quickly. And when we know what's available, we can then bring our programs to bear and offer those programs as resources. So as Destin mentioned, we've got the Job Growth Grant Fund, which can go into helping develop sites, get infrastructure in place to get manufacturers on a site. We've got rural programs, a rural revolving loan fund that can go to help rural communities at a low cost. We've got technical assistance and planning grants to help communities plan for their needs for the future. So all that said, the best way for us to work is as a team, to communicate and to know what's going on. Forewarned is forearmed, and that's how we move the fastest. When we're brought in at the earliest stages, we're able to work with you, we're able to provide assistance, we're able to work with our partners, and we're able to get projects to the finish line and across the finish line quicker.
Okay. Appreciate that. Greg, I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to go back to something that Dr. Parrish and I both talked about, the Florida 2030 Blueprint goals, 10th largest economy in the world, and specifically on manufacturing. How do we beat Illinois? How do we get 200,000 more manufacturing jobs? So within the goals, we want to double the exports of goods and triple service exports. So we're very specific about that. And I'm wondering if you can zero in on that like a laser beam and talk about how does the SBDC approach that? If businesses were going to approach you to say, hey, we want to increase exports, what specific tools might be available in Florida for that?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So we have a fantastic program, and it's in partnership with Enterprise Florida. It's what we call the Export Marketing Plan program, and that program was established back in 2012. And since the inception of that program, we've done about 250 of those plans complete. Some of those are still in the works. But those plans, for those small businesses that took advantage of those plans, they have increased their sales revenue by $77 million in total, right? And those plans generated $151 million worth of capital, and they created 32,458 jobs for our state. So it's a fantastic program for the small business. It costs them $500. We want them to have some skin in the game. Enterprise Florida, on their piece, they give a $4,500 scholarship towards those plans to that small business owner. And those plans, when they're done, they're probably a $20,000 plan. The issue is, and there's $99,000 for those plans. So we max out that opportunity each year. So it's just a fantastic program that, it really moves the needle, as you can tell, on the export goals for the Florida Chamber 2030 blueprint. And we're always excited to work with Enterprise Florida, and we'd like to do more of those plans in the future.
So Greg, you know me well enough to know anytime you've got a program that works, that runs out of funding, we can either go to the legislature, Clay, and say, what else are we going to do about that? Or, the economists will tell us if you want something less of it, tax it. So my idea is think of all the billboard trial lawyer ads we have in Florida. By the way, we have more billboards encouraging you to sue someone in Florida than any country on the planet does.
Yeah.
And we therefore, one of the 39 goals in Florida is to fix our broken lawsuit abuse problem. Right now, we have the 46th worst legal climate in the United States, and we want to be top 12 by 2030. So all those billboards that are out there, my suggestion of how we can get dedicated funding into manufacturing and into that program specifically, we need, and come see me afterwards if you want to help me with this, we need a personal income tax on trial lawyers in Florida, right? So just think about that. That dedicated funding source would decrease the number of lawsuits, increase exponentially to the tune of billions, dedicated funding that could go into manufacturing and infrastructure. So, Greg, I would love to see you add that to the SBDC agenda. We'll see if we can help you get that done.
You don't want me to get fired really quick, right?
Well, maybe I can say it and you can't. We'll go from there. So I want to come back, Dave, to you. We talked about GrowFL and we talked about SBDC. In your company, you and I talked about this on the phone, in your company, can you give us some very specifics about how either GrowFL or SBDC or both have actually helped your company very, very specifically, so people in the audience and online will know, maybe they can get that kind of assistance as well?
Sure. So let me take these separately. GrowFL first. And the reason that I'm involved in GrowFL has a very specific charge, and the charge is to develop the leadership portion of the organization. So peer learning, CEO Nexus, systems for integrated growth, getting access to information that is normally reserved for much bigger companies, things that are going to grow a manufacturing company or any kind of a company really. But so GrowFL is a little bit different than, say, the SBDC. So GrowFL does a very good job with me at the helm. No, I've only been there for a couple months, so I'm just still working on it. But no, like I said, our goal is to develop that leadership so that those companies grow. The second part, and that is totally different, what we discussed, and we even discussed this at the table earlier, that I think that the SBDC and these state organizations can assist with, is in the skills gap. A lot of people, if you watch the national news, talk about the importance of higher education. Well, nobody's talking about trade schools anymore. Nobody's talking about skills gap in manufacturing. When you look at some of these numbers for these pay scales for skilled manufacturing labor, these are on the order of college degree level income. So I would say, promoting the advancement and the sort of the messaging of of skilled or non-skilled or even trade-based labor, welders, fabricators, wiring techs, panel builders, things like that's what we employ. The majority of our employment are people that produce things. So for me, that would be probably my single most impactful need that I could receive from SBDC.
So thank you for that, Dave. Before I go to Destin on that, you and I talked on the phone quite a bit about the point you just made about skilled trades. Not everybody needs a 4-year degree. And when you think about, we need 2 million new jobs by 2030, and about 200, Jerry would have covered this, but about 200,000 of them are recovering from COVID, right? So that's about 1.8 million, 1.7 million, depending on how you do the math. a lot of those jobs, probably a good, more than half of those jobs don't require college education. And so, if we think about skilled trades, we're launching a massive couple-year effort on this. And the challenge we have, a lot of us have kids, and my kids are 20, 21, and 24. And I had this conversation with them at the dinner table, right, when they were teenagers. And the peer pressure they were under, no, I need to go to a university. I need to go to college. It's like I tried to talk them out of it for this very conversation that we have right here. And it's a problem our country has, but it's an opportunity I think Florida can lead in. So thanks for having the courage to put it on the table today.
Let me make one more comment too. I have a kid, because he's the same age as my middle son, that's been with me for 6 years, and he came to me as a welder, as a fabricator. And I sent him to robotics school in Colorado Springs, and he came back and he operates our cutting and welding cell. That is a high-tech job. That's defined, Paul Soul and I talked about this at the corridor, that, when you think high-tech can be, the internet and all these other things, and high-tech can be high-tech manufacturing.
Absolutely. Destin, I'm coming to you next with a question you're not expecting, so heads up. All of us have seen TV commercials that Enterprise Florida is running, and most of us have seen manufacturing highlighted. One of our members, Tervis, is highlighted in one of your commercials. So in case you've missed them and you've been under a rock, Enterprise Florida is running very pro-Florida, pro-business commercials right now on several different industry sectors, mostly small businesses. These are running around the country. They're running around Florida. And I just wonder, you're in charge of business development at EFI, so you're probably getting phone calls saying, hey, tell me about that. Can you give us a little insight into why we're doing that campaign and how can all of us help?
Sure.
Right?
Well, I didn't have that one canned, so I'll just see what I can do with it. So the Stories of Opportunity campaign really is all about the experiences that we've all been through in this last year and a half. And the way in which that the state responded to that and the way that it took the considerations of business into account and made decisions to ensure that we had continuity, that we had a strong economy, that we mitigated to the greatest extent the damage that some other parts of our country and other states have felt much more severely. So how do you tell that story? Almost you have to have a certain sensitivity in how you were telling that story, given what everyone has been through. And by featuring smaller businesses, by featuring manufacturers and having them tell their own stories. For me, I quite literally get paid to sell the state of Florida to businesses. And so it's discounted automatically. But when you hear from Tervis and when you hear from these other companies, they're using their words, they're using their experiences. I can tell you that manufacturing in the state of Florida was very resilient throughout the pandemic. In fact, I just rejoined the state a few months ago, but prior I was with Sarasota County conducting economic development on the local level. And in fact, our experiences there were that our local manufacturers were expanding quite rapidly, that they were taking parts of the process and bringing it a little bit closer to home, mitigating some of that challenge and the uncertainties of product movement and supply chains and all the things we've seen. So this campaign is really just about sharing those stories and letting people understand in a way what operating in the state of Florida brings. It's not just a phenomenal tax climate. It's not access to a massive market. It's not just access to a growing population and growing labor force. It's access to a climate in which businesses are encouraged, are supported, and are given the tools to thrive. So hopefully through these videos and through this campaign, that message is heard out. I can certainly say that the response has been very positive. There is no question we've had a number of inquiries and folks coming to us talking about coming into the state of Florida. Primarily, I don't think this would surprise many folks, but from the Northeast, the upper Midwest, and from California. And so this is a way of us getting the word out and making sure that people understand that Florida is open for business. We have been open for business. And honestly, I hear a lot of people talk about reopening. Well, you got to close to reopen. So it's a good story for us to be telling to our folks out there.
Great, appreciate that. And sorry to throw you a curveball. Adam, I want to come to you. I want to talk about industry diversification and sectors that we're going after. And for this to make sense, we're all in here to talk about how to grow manufacturing jobs. When all of us leave here, we were working with the legislature to convince them that manufacturing is in fact one of the most important sectors that we need to invest in, whether it's talent, infrastructure, Jerry talked about the sales tax. that we were able to eliminate several years ago. All of this stuff helps build the ecosystem for manufacturing. But because we're a room full of manufacturing advocates, what are the other industries that Florida's trying to attract? And so, 30 years ago, we were the 5th cheapest place to live in the United States. Today, we're right in the middle. And everybody thinks we're tourism, agriculture, and construction. And that'll always be important to Florida. But what are the other sectors that the Department of Economic Opportunity really sees as opportunities for Florida that we all need to be educated about?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Manufacturing has been a target industry for Florida for many years. We've got a target industry list that DEO and EFI, we update on a fairly regular basis every few years that I think is actually coming up for an update maybe next year. I don't anticipate that we'll be taking manufacturing off of that list anytime soon. But in addition, to Destin's point earlier, manufacturing is making things, but it's not necessarily just making things, right? You've got other things tied in. You've got companies that are buying those manufactured products, companies that are, you've got the corporate headquarters for those companies, all those different things that tie into that end result or that source into that final product. So, in that target industry list, we're constantly looking at things in the information technology sector, which goes into manufacturing. You can't have advanced manufacturing without mechatronics and robotics technology. Corporate headquarters, manufacturers, they have a corporate structure, whether it's a 10-man shop or a 10,000-man shop. You're looking at biomedical companies. Biomedical companies, they still manufacture. All of them tie in. So, all that being said, manufacturing ties into it all, but there are so many other sectors that Florida has looked at strategically and is continuing to look at strategically as those industries that are going to keep the Florida economy strong and growing.
Well, appreciate that. So I'm going to ask everybody one last question, and I'm essentially going to ask all of you the same question, and then we're going to go to audience questions, just give everybody a heads up there. So we started the conversation off about we want to add 200,000 manufacturing jobs in 10 years. And tomorrow, as was mentioned, we have the Florida Chamber's annual meeting, Future of Florida Forum. We're completely sold out. We've had to shift to virtual now, and the governor's going to be here, the Senate President, the House Speaker. We have 75 speakers, actually. So this is a double question. I'm going to be on stage a lot in the next 48 hours, and we're talking a lot about manufacturing in Florida. We want everybody from the governor to our representative officials to bankers and small businesses, you name it. We want everybody to know that manufacturing is here and it's what's next. So if you were king for a day, and I'll just say it that way, and you could do anything, right, policy-wise, you name it, in Florida to help manufacturing along, to make us the best destination in the country for manufacturing, what would it be? And I'm asking this for selfish reasons because I'm going to take your answers tomorrow and the next day, and I'm also going to share them with our membership and online, virtually, and so forth. So, Greg, we'll start with you. We'll go right on down the table. And this is going to be the last question I ask you before we go to the audience. So if there's something you missed and forgot to say, I would say go ahead and add that in too.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Florida Makes for having me here today to speak on the panel. And I am a Florida Makes board member as well, so honored to be a board member. But if I was king for the day, I think you never miss an opportunity. You got to seize an opportunity, right? And I think if you look at the ships that are off of California, just sitting out there for miles, just waiting to get into our ports, there's ships off of Savannah doing the same thing, right? I hear the governor say, come into our ports and we'll take care of you, right? But we have a supply chain problem. Walk the stores, look at the bare shelves. I was watching the news this morning and the Houston Astros in the World Series. So I don't know if you're Astros fans out there, but you might not be able to get a jersey or a hat because they're out there somewhere in a ship in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So we've got to bring that manufacturing back. And I think how we do that is all these partners that we've talked about today, we've got to work closely together in the sandbox and help our businesses that are currently here in our state survive, succeed, and get into the next technology world, right? So we need to create programs around Industry 4.0. We need to create programs around talent. We need to create programs around, how people buy equipment, or, you know, the equipment that these manufacturers buy. So I don't know, I'm just throwing this out here, and Adam's going to kill me, and so maybe will Destin, but SSBCI, $300 and some odd million coming into our state, right? What if we could create loan programs that are very low interest around those kind of things, like buying high-tech equipment or Industry 4.0 type things? Look, the interest rate's not what's important. That's very little back to the state. It's what we create in these jobs in manufacturing and what you guys all do to make that happen. So I thank you for that.
Same question.
Same question. Okay, ignore the federal government.
No, add it in if you think it's important.
No, what our governor is doing right now is absolutely very pro-business. I feel it as a business owner. And probably, you know, and I'll speak as again, a member of this infrastructure here, you're doing the right thing right now. You're bringing all of these assets together for the benefit of the business owner. Again, stepping back from GrowFL chair and acting as the business, I know where to go to get leadership advice. I know where to go to get advice or recommendations on finding skilled labor, finding employment. I know where to go to develop my business. I know, so there's so much of this available. I think what's happening, and this is going to sound like a canned response, but it's not. But what you're doing is working, because when I first got involved with the Volusia County EDC, it almost felt, and this is no offense to Volusia County because they were fantastic, Bill Kyriakakis, who was the first person I met out there, there didn't seem to be a lot of connectivity county to county. And even when we decided to move from Volusia to Seminole County, as much as Volusia didn't like losing a business, they were all for the business staying in Florida. So I think what we're doing here now, talking about it, you know, spreading the word with these messages from the organizations, getting to the people like me, business owners, and that's what's going to create this. That's what's going to get you to your goal, is getting the message out there and making sure we bring people into the fold and show them what's available to them that is essentially at no charge to them. Right. It's available from the state. So
cool. Copy
Thank you for that.
I may come back to you for one more. So Destin and Adam, Destin, how do we make, what would you do? How do we make Florida more competitive for manufacturers? And then Adam, really the wrap up question for you too is how do we get more manufacturing jobs in Florida? So.
All right, so I'm going to go with benevolent dictator as opposed to king for a day. I have 3 different areas I'd like to see addressed and that I think could really move the needle. I use the term alignment a lot. We have all of these different partners. We have many, many more across the state. We do a decent job at talking to one another. You can always improve. Defining the ecosystem, communicating the ecosystem. That's where I find myself in a bit of frustration when I talk to an employer or to a company that's been banging their head against the wall for months on end because they weren't aware of the opportunities and support that is out there for them. So that's number 1. Number 2, and probably should be number 1, is workforce. I mean, this is the battlefront of every industry, manufacturing certainly included within that. I like the things that we are doing in the state. I think rapid credentialing is very important. Investment in technical training is very important. I think we need to be reaching down farther in the school system, certainly middle, and in some cases, elementary schools, and doing more of that type of STEM education. I know we do a lot of STEM, right? Very popular right now, STEAM. But how do we turn that from an activity into a pathway? So workforce is definitely an area I'd like to see the rapid credentialing expanded, more funding to our technical schools, more throughput. We have a lot of technical schools out there right now that would love to be putting more kids through their programs, but their funding is the constraint. And then finally, let me say I had 3, right? So 3rd, site development. This is a big constraint for us in this state. We are running, so land and sites are 2 different things. You know, it's very easy. We drive down the highway and you see all these fields off to the side. You're like, well, you can put a manufacturing facility out there for sure. The truth of the matter is that once we start looking for sites for different manufacturers in the state, particularly once you start getting to that 200+ acres, type of greenfield activity, it gets extraordinarily thin. And then you have the wetlands issues, and then you have water availability and all these different things. So site development is another constraint that is, honestly, it's preventing us from getting into the game on some of these activities and opportunities. So those would be the three areas that benevolent dictator for a day I'm going to tackle.
That's the way we'll do the minutes, Destin. I hear you loud and clear. Adam, how do we add more manufacturing jobs in Florida?
Well, I think, as a king for a day on that, I think we would take a policy direction and kind of direct policy towards addressing those national gaps that exist currently. So when I say national gaps, I mean, you've got supply chain gaps, like Greg mentioned. You've got advanced technology gaps, chip manufacturing, silicon wafers, semiconductors. There is a national gap, and Florida has demonstrated time and again that we're great on policy. We're first on policy. And I think it's a good policy direction to take the lead on addressing those national gaps and getting those jobs here, seeing what that looks like. I think also, in that vein, to grow those jobs, we need to get out there and we need to start talking to companies, more than we already do, approaching companies, finding companies that maybe they're not even considering moving yet. Maybe they're happy where they're at, but they're not really happy. Maybe we can tell them why they're not as happy there as they would be here and start trying to pull them into the state, more proactively, getting them here. And then the final thing is just continued investment in infrastructure, investment in workforce training, having those things go hand in hand. And the more infrastructure is available for businesses to site on, the more there is a trained and ready workforce for businesses to utilize, the friendlier it is for businesses and the easier it is for them to make the decision to come here.
Okay. I want to thank everybody. Before we go to the audience, Dave, I want to come back to you for a second. You're the only one on the panel that has a manufacturing company today. And, you and I talked on the phone about this, your story. You obviously started with an idea and then you had to get to second stage. What if you were writing a book about this, what would the story be about? What were your challenges going from the thought and sort of the startup to all of a sudden second stage? What could we learn from you since we've got you on the podium?
You segued right into my Grow FL presentation. But one of the things I've said since I became familiar with Grow FL as a Florida Companies to Watch awardee in 2014. Then for 3 years, I ignored them. I went on, looked at that pretty plaque and walked right by it for 3 years. And although we as a company had a great idea, and we were growing, the one thing that I've always said is there is no handbook for being a CEO. There's no handbook for starting a business. And that's what I was able to develop on my own, is my own handbook. And how am I going to know what direction to take if I don't listen to the people that blaze the path before me? So some of it is self-directed motivation, and some of it is very strategic involvement with these organizations that helped me understand what direction I wanted to take with that business. And just a little side note, I started in 2007 and I actually sold the business in October 1st, a couple of weeks ago. It closed. I'm still here. I'm still president of the company. I'm no longer CEO, but the company that acquired us is a European company. They have a U.S. division, and there's a $2 billion European company, and they want a larger footprint in Florida. The one thing they told me when they came on board is one of the reasons that you guys were so attractive is because you were in Florida, and that sort of blew my mind. They understand the value of having a footprint in Florida, and they want to enlarge that footprint. So there's still a lot of opportunity there.
Awesome. And I want to quickly go to the audience now. I don't know if there's anybody that's got a question. Why don't we start right over here? Do we need a microphone? Is that right? Thanks, Joel. I appreciate the pointer.
Is this on? All right, great. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for the information that you shared with us. Very insightful. Council. My name's Ryan Shirley. I'm a commercial banker at Synovus, and I think it's been alluded to through some of the information you've shared, whether it's business acquisition or site development or equipments and such for manufacturing. But I work with clients to provide access to capital and improve their financial technology, both which obviously impacts growth. So as you work with businesses across Florida, can you speak on how access to capital and improved financial technology is playing a key role in growth? And that could be whether it's from the state as a whole down to the individual business. I'd like to hear some feedback. Thank you.
That's when we all look at each other and wonder who the heck's going to tackle that one. So I'll take a swing, I guess. All right, so access to capital is certainly one of the larger challenges for a lot of companies, whether that's growth capital, whether that's seed capital. And so you have to tackle that holistically. There's the traditional and commercial routes, there's the SBA lenders, there's the SSBCI program, there's a lot of different avenues out there. And so, I talk about ecosystem with partners, there's an ecosystem for financing opportunities. And having those clearly defined, having the channels for which us to guide the companies and the individuals that are looking for expansion or relocation support and that financing, that's an area that we build out on a continuous basis. We have to have the relationships with traditional lending, but we also have to have all of the different creative options out there, whether it's SBA, whether it's new market tax credits, whether it's the Opportunity Zone program. There's so many different areas out there that a lot of people get overwhelmed and thus abandon and say, well, I'm just going to go to the guy that I know, which most traditionally is their commercial banker. So I think just as I talked about building that ecosystem around the partners and the different people that help businesses, defining that ecosystem of financing opportunities is something that we can improve upon and something that would be very beneficial for our current manufacturers and all companies, as well as when we're attracting and talking to others, particularly as capital pertains, because that is, I'm pulling a number out. I go 30% of the folks that are approaching us to come to the state of Florida financing, and that is a piece of the conversation that they need help with.
Greg, you probably got something to say about this, don't you?
Yeah, just a little bit. So just in our being around the state, I'm hearing a lot of these small business owners, they've taken a lot of money through PPP or EIDL and those kind of things. And when the EIDL program came out, and a lot of small businesses don't know this, but the SBA took a general liability, general UCC across all of the assets for the company. So these small business owners are going to be in a position that they really need the lending and such to grow, because the economy is coming back. It's coming back really strong in Florida, and they're going to need that access to capital to be able to expand. But the SBA will take a back seat to that. You just have to ask them. And so, getting with the SBDC or whoever and saying, and we can help them through that process to make that happen. But so I think these programs that, I can't agree more with Destin. I think these programs that we have at the state, I think we got to couple all those together with that traditional commercial lending. And I think there's going to be a time, and you're a banker, you can probably tell us this, right? There's going to be a time where this commercial lending is really tight right now. They're going to be really looking at the balance sheets and the P&Ls and those kind of things, where the SBDC can come in and help with that, making sure they got clean balance sheets and they know how to be bankable, good personal financial statements and things. But the end result is, I think the commercial lending banks are also going to have to loosen up some of their requirements. And I think they're ready to lend as well. But that's what I'm hearing. So.
Well, I want to thank everybody. And also, just before we leave the stage, I know Kevin Carr couldn't be with us today, but I think all of us wish him a quick return and Godspeed, Kevin, if you're out there listening to us somewhere. Florida Makes is the leader in Florida for all things manufacturing. They are who we look to at the Florida Chamber for telling us what do we need to do to beat Illinois. And Kevin, Zoraida, and the team are a voice for that. And one thing I would ask all of you to do by the end of the week is, we had at the Florida Chamber, this was our best year financially in the history of our 100+ year organization. We're going to be able to take tens of millions of dollars and pour it right back into our mission for you in the coming years. I would ask you to go back and find out what you invest in Florida Makes, and find a way to double it or triple it in the short term. You all make things, but Florida Makes it better, this a better place to make things. And so I know Kevin's not here, but hopefully he's listening. And I would just ask all of you, right? Go back home, find $10,000 for Florida Makes, right? Make it happen, right? Because this state, we're competing with other states, we're competing with other countries, and it matters. Ryan, I appreciate your question about financing. Florida is known for being a free state. We're a right-to-work state, and when you look at us compared to California, New York, and so forth, being a free state is vital. But being known for innovation and investment is something we need to really up our game on. And for example, venture capital, and I know it's not exactly what we're talking about right now, but we are 7th in the country right now on venture capital. And I want you to be thinking about your question. California gets more venture capital every 16 days than Florida does in a year. So we need to up our game. We need to be known for manufacturing. We need to be known for innovation. And we need to be known as the place where if you need investment, Florida's not just a free state, but it's the best state. And so, Zoraida, Florida Makes, I want to thank everybody for inviting all of us. To our panelists, I know you did a lot of preparation for today, and you invested a lot to be here today. So thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. Looking forward to the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Mark, Greg, Dave, Destin, and Adam. That was, I think, a really helpful conversation about the resources we have here, right? And about the things that these organizations are doing to help move manufacturing forward. So if you didn't know about the services they talked about, the issues they address, the impact that they're making, please make sure you go back to your communities and find out who your local SBDC is. I know Hannah from GrowFL is here, with Dave. Talk to them about the work that they're doing at GrowFL and for manufacturers. Enterprise Florida has been a supporter of the MakeMore initiative since its inception. So we appreciate, Dustin, you being here and continuing to support manufacturing. We're all working on this together. And we've recently really built our relationship with the Department of Economic Opportunity to the point where we're having monthly calls with Adam to keep him posted on what's happening with manufacturing. And, they're interested in keeping their ear to the ground. So if you guys have feedback that we can share with them, please continue that conversation so that we can continue to support the organizations that are making a difference for manufacturing in our state. So now we go to have coffee, dessert. This is the only break that we have. Unfortunately, they put it outside, so we're gonna have to herd you back in, but it's 2:38. We'll kick back off at 2:48. So please try to be back here at 2:47 so you get a chance to take your seat.